and a huge warm welcome to my guest today, Johanna Simmons, who I'm really excited to talk to. But first, before we get into our conversation, I'd love to tell you a little more about our guest. Johanna is a Canadian play therapist, educator, and author whose work bridges neuroscience, attachment, and expressive play-based healing. With more than 4 decades of experience supporting children, families, and helping professionals, she is known for translating complex nervous system science into compassionate, practical tools that deepen connection and emotional safety. Her neuro-informed approach draws from interpersonal neurobiology, polyvagal theory, Adlerian encouragement, and expressive play therapy, helping adults see children's behaviour not as something to control, but as meaningful communication shaped by the body, relationships, and lived experience. Deeply influenced by holistic expressive play therapy, and synergetic play therapy, Johanna integrates embodiment, co-regulation, and relational presence into both clinical practice and teaching. She is an active leader within the Canadian play therapy community, mentoring therapists and shaping professional standards. Johanna is the author of Parenting in the 21st Century, The Neuro-Informed Parent, a compassionate guide that weaves neuroscience, play, and real-life stories to help families build calmer, more connected relationships. Johanna lives and works in British Columbia, Canada, where she continues to teach, write, supervise, and advocate for children and the adults who care for them. What an impressive bio, and I cannot wait to get into our conversation today. So please welcome Johanna to the podcast today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Lucy. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Not at all. I think you're going to bring an amazing conversation today with a wealth of knowledge and expertise. So I cannot wait to learn more about the work that you do. But just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into play therapy and what first drew you to this work?
Okay, so in high school, grade 10, I was 14, a friend of mine gave me the book Play Therapy, written by Virginia Axline. After reading that book, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a play therapist. But of course, life doesn't always work out the way you want, and I ended up going into teaching for a few years. Then I was a stay-at-home mom. Then I went back to school to get my degree in psychology, so that finally I could become a play therapist. So it's a long time passion.
Isn't it funny how you have to flex and move with life, isn't it? You know, when you have to change your direction or put something on pause while, you have a family and things like that. And it's wonderful to hear that you had that initial passion. Life happened, but you went back to it and kind of navigated back towards that way. It's just funny how life works out that way, isn't it?
It is funny. And, you just say, well, it just wasn't meant to be that early on. I had to go through this path in order to get there.
Absolutely. I live by the saying, everything happens for a reason. And I think we learn from everything that we encounter in our lives, don't we? So it can't be any other way. So you've been working with families and children for a long time now. Has anything kind of stayed consistent in terms of children's needs? The way that the world moves, and we've just said, things happen and life changes. But have you noticed anything consistent in terms of children's needs?
Children need 2 things, and we all as adults all of us need 2 things. One is safety, and then we need connection. We are born to connect. So those 2 things have not changed throughout the centuries.
Is that something that really kind of embodies a lot of what you do? And as you've kind of gone over the years, having those 2 things consistently there as like a baseline, I guess, as you develop practice over years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I say, safety is a biological imperative. And without safety, we can't function. We can't connect. We can't have relationships. It's as I say, a biological imperative.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I guess in a way I've come across a lot in terms of children being able to learn effectively in environments, they have to feel safe first. And I guess when we're talking about school environments, or for my own research around home education within the home environment, that kind of base level of feeling safe and secure and loved and all of those things, they kind of have to be there first. And do you know what's interesting is the study that I'm doing at the moment for my PhD, and I'm working with 7 different home educators. And one of the parents said to me when they're teaching with their child, and said, like, if the child isn't engaged, she goes right back to basics as a parent and goes, right, are they hungry, are they tired, do they just need a hug? And once we've addressed those things, then we go back to our learning. And I think that's kind of it, isn't it? It's that core level of feeling safe, loved, heard, and valued in that space.
She knows that it's a basic need. We have to look at, okay, why is that child misbehaving? Primarily, is there a basic need that's not being met? As you said, food, sleep, thirst, hunger, right? Address
Yeah,
that first.
absolutely. Yeah. So you've spoken before about a meaningful connection. What does that look like in terms of how parents can view that, maybe within the home or in everyday life? What does it mean by meaningful connection?
Well, a meaningful connection would be a deep connection, not just a superficial one. A meaningful connection is one where you can, and it's not always easy, but attune to your child and look below the surface. I mean, and see what's going on for your child. As I say, it's more than just a superficial relationship. We can all be present with our children in body, but we need to be present with our children in mind, body, and spirit, really, in order to have that meaningful connection.
Do you think that's something that comes naturally to parents? Is it something that everyone should be able to do, or is it something that we can learn and grow and develop within?
It's absolutely something that we can learn, because if we didn't have that growing up, um, we haven't learned it. We don't have that. So we can't give what we don't have, right? So it's absolutely something that can be learned. It takes practice
Hmm.
too. It's not, right. We're not going to all of a sudden move to being this attuned, completely present parent.
Hmm. It's hard, isn't it? And I think with parenting, it comes with a lot of stigma sometimes. It comes with a lot of judgment. And it can be really hard when something like that doesn't come naturally to you, and you have to kind of learn on the go, because that is what parenting is, isn't it? We don't get a handbook from the word go. And even if we did, it wouldn't be relevant for every child. So we are very much learning on the go.
Mhm.
Um, how can we support parents better in terms of making that shift of, rather than looking at behavior and thinking, how do I stop this? And changing that mindset to, what is this behavior telling me? Why is this behavior presenting itself?
So, how can we make that mind shift? Was your question correct?
Yeah. And how can we support parents to do that?
Well, let's go back and address the judgment and the all of the eyes out there that are always on us as parents, right? And so, first of all, we have to develop blinders and just look at, never mind what everybody else thinks. Everybody's going to have a judgment whether you're doing things well or whether you're not doing things as well. I had an adage that just said, I would always repeat, walk a mile in my shoes, right? You don't know
Hmm.
what I'm going through with my particular child at that moment, or even in the background, right? So parenting is, as I say, the hardest job you'll ever do, the one for which you receive no training. And then on top of that, you get all of this judgment. So please, if you can, just ignore all of that. Um, so again, we have to make that conscious choice to do that, first of all, pause and not react to the behavior, and try and figure out what that meaning is behind the behavior. And this is where, too, um, the neuroscience and the nervous system comes into play, right? Is that we can, if we pause, kind of do a scan. And again, this takes practice to know what's going on in our body, but take a scan to find out what's going on in our body. And what's going on in our body is what we have actually picked up that is also going on in our child's body. And the science behind that is we have these things in our brains called mirror neurons that will mirror the other person's actions, nervous systems, etc. Right? And we know that for like, if you all of a sudden yawn, I will either feel very much like yawning or I will yawn. So attuning into your body, as I said, gives you a clue as to what's happening in your child's body and your child's nervous system. And then you can respond from that place, right? So if you're noticing frustration and a tightness in your chest, for instance, and you say, wow, I'm noticing frustration. My chest is really tight. And then you regulate through that tightness, you will help. Now you will help again through the mirror neuron system, your child's nervous system come back to a more regulated state.
So
So it
is
really
this,
is go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask, so is this what is meant when we talk about co-regulation?
Yes, co-regulation is regulating our nervous system so that our child's nervous system can mirror ours and then help them with regulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's like we're lending our nervous system to our child because children cannot regulate on their own. They do not have, their brain is not developed to the point where they can do that. And we learn to regulate through co-regulation.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, that we lend our nervous system to our child. That's so
Mhm.
beautiful because, it just embodies what a parent is, isn't it? That kind of self-sacrifice of a parent, but also, sharing that with your child. And it can be, I'm suspecting it can be quite a bonding moment, because in that moment, your child, you are your child's safety net, right? And they are feeding off of your nervous system and how you're coping in that situation. And I guess we see it all the time, don't we? In terms of, if we see someone overwhelmed, and even if it's two adults and that person takes hold of that person, I've had instances where you're touching heads and just kind of breathing together and things, and it all kind of comes together. And I think it can be a really beautiful bonding moment in such a highly stressful situation.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it, again, by identifying what we're feeling, the child goes, oh my gosh, that's what I'm feeling. And my parent, my caregiver, really gets me, right? They feel so heard, so seen. And again, that is a beautiful bonding moment.
Hmm. Yeah. Why is it so important that a child feels that emotional sense of safety? Why does that matter so much?
Again, we are without feeling that safety, the child will be in survival mode, which is in a flight, freeze, or collapse response. When the child or their nervous system is in that survival mode, the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking brain, completely shuts off, right? And so, if you can imagine, I mean, how can you connect with any being or even a creature that is in that survival mode? You can't, right? There's that system has just completely shut down.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's where it comes back to when we say that when a child is in overwhelm, meltdown, shutdown, in that kind of emotional overwhelm, it's not a teaching moment. It's not a moment to do anything like that. It's you've got to come down from that first. I think I read somewhere about having like an upstairs and a downstairs brain, and that you can't do anything productive as such whilst you're in this sense of fight or flight. It needs to come down from that overwhelm first, because that is all the body is concentrating on. Would that be a fair reflection?
Absolutely. So that upstairs, downstairs brain is the work of Dan Siegel. And yes, we have to have children reconnect with their upstairs brain in order to be able to communicate, to reach them. was going to say, even for us, right? I mean, we have our moments when we are in our downstairs brain and that reptilian fight flight collapse, right? We know that when we're there, we can't hear anybody, what the mouths might be moving, but we don't hear people. We cannot, we are just not, again, we are not connected to ourselves at all.
Mm.
So we
Yeah,
can't
it's so
expect it from our
true.
children either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really helpful to kind of draw on that context and that kind of lived experience and to say, you've been there as a parent before. You know how challenging it is in those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed. Think back to how you felt and, your young person is experiencing this and that's how they feel. So it's kind of it's a learning and teaching moment for both the parent and the child, I guess, because you're learning more about them through the eyes of how you've experienced things as well, which I think is really important. Is there a difference in terms of nervous system regulating and what we've been discussing? Is there a difference in coping with the situation if your child is neurodivergent or has additional needs?
My answer to that is a nervous system is a nervous system is a nervous system, right? And right, so ultimately it's all about regulation. Your neurodivergent child may their nervous system, let's say, may be at a higher level of like the resting level may be a more activated level in their nervous system, so it may take less for them to actually, go into a survival response or fight, flight, or collapse. But a nervous system is a nervous system, and there is not much difference.
And I guess this comes back to, treating every child as an individual and being in the moment and looking at the context and looking at the individual young person in front of you and, working in that sense. So, I guess it all those other things come into play when you're maybe thinking about potential triggers or, things that are affecting those moments happening and as we said earlier about looking behind the behavior and why the
Yeah,
behavior or the communication is happening that way, but actually in terms of the regulation element of it, you can only deal with what's in front of you and that individual person.
exactly. So, and a trigger for a neurotypical person um, may not be a trigger for a neurodivergent person, and vice versa. So, the the whys are unique, but the how is really the same. Is really the same, right?
Interesting. So we touched upon polyvagal theory earlier when I spoke about it in your bio. It can sound quite complex. Can you simplify it a little bit for our listeners or anyone who hasn't heard of the term before? And how does it show up in everyday parenting moments?
Okay. Um, Simplifying it. So I'll put it this way. So polyvagal theory says there are three states of the nervous system. One is hyperarousal, so a lot of activation in the nervous system. Regulation, which is where there's activation in the nervous system, but we can stay connected to ourselves. So it's not calm, it's different from calm, but we are grounded, we can breathe, we notice our breath, we can think clearly. And then the third state is hypoarousal, which is the collapse, where you see children who, look dazed or appear lifeless. So, and what's significant about that, I think, for every day is knowing that we go up and down that ladder throughout the day constantly. We're never going to always be in a hyper aroused state or always in a regulated state or always in a hypo aroused state. We're going to travel through that ladder. So know that about your child, know that about yourself. Our nervous system is constantly shifting.
So for those parents that may struggle with distinguishing between a child deliberately being oppositional about something and a child that has gone into survival mode because of overwhelm or the like, how can a parent Are there signs to tell the difference between the two? Is it just knowing your child, or are there kind of telltale signs that this is actually an overwhelm, dysregulation in survival mode?
So all behavior is a communication from the nervous system. So defiance is that child in that fight response, or maybe a fight flight response at that point. So again, there is no distinction. The opposition is a behavior in response to the activation in the nervous system. I hope that's clear.
so so it is just, as we were saying, going back to in the moment, looking at what is needed in the moment for that child to come down from that overwhelm, regardless of whether it is being in survival mode, or the defiance that's coming through. It's bringing down from that overwhelm. Okay.
Mhm.
I want to touch upon emotional processing and why play is such a powerful tool to help with emotional processing. I guess, thinking about your work with play therapy, it obviously has a huge role in helping children in those moments. How does that help in those moments with the emotional processing?
So play is a natural language of children to start with. That's how children communicate. Children are very right-brained, right? So they're in their right brain. It's creative, imaginative play, etc. And play is a right-brained expression. Therefore, um, um, therefore, play is, you think of it as a right brain to right brain connection. So again, I'll just say it is, because it's a right brain process and the children are in their right brain. That's where things are gonna happen. That's where you're going to see them be able to process their emotions. So they'll come home from school. They've had a bad day. They had a fight with a child, with one of their playmates, and you might see them play out some kind of conflict scene in their play, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is also subconsciously they will move through some kind of resolution through the play, which will translate to them actually being able to acquire some kind of a skill. Now, it sounds simplistic, and that is probably a simplistic explanation, but they do work things out through play, and it's invaluable. Children need to play. They need free, unstructured play time. And they also need, not always, but I suggest once a week, some playtime with their parent, where they can actually be in charge of the play. They can take the lead. The parent merely follows the child. And that's an incredibly bonding experience. And you're giving child agency and control over the play and basically over their parent. And it's the only time really that and it's an appropriate time for that to happen with children. 20 minutes a week of this special playtime, as I call it, or as it's called, again, is invaluable to building relationship and building connection.
Is that enough? 20 minutes in a week? Do you think that it needs to be more than that? Because I mean, I would imagine that 20 minutes a day would be, but I suppose not everybody has that time to do that.
Exactly. I say 20 minutes a week. That's probably realistic. The more you can, well, the more you can do it, the better. However, it can't always be that child parent play either. They need their free time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's matter. So it's balancing. And there are times when the parent comes in and they're directive. Hey, today we're going to do a craft. Let's all, we're going to make puppets out of paper bags. Right. So
Yeah.
we have to give them all kinds of play. And as I said, if you can do that on that special play time, 20 minutes a week, if that's all that you can do, that's certainly better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the beautiful thing about play is even if the child doesn't have isn't verbal or isn't old enough, there is still that possibility, that opportunity to communicate through action, through role play, through, and I guess that's one of the brilliant things around play therapy, is providing that space for communication that doesn't have to be sitting down and having a conversation.
Absolutely. And again, it's that right brain to right brain connection. Right?
Mm,
You're both speaking the same language, the
yeah,
language of play.
yeah, and I guess as well that for any kind of interaction between people who maybe don't speak the same language. The words are there, but the language is different, and it breaks down a barrier, doesn't it? Is the kind of vibe I'm getting from this, is it breaks down that barrier of communication so that you can still communicate, but in, an array of other ways. One thing I do wonder is, because I recently was leading a project looking with an autism charity. And when I was talking to the therapists that were involved in the project, and they were going into families and observing how the interactions between the child and the parents were, and supporting that kind of playful interaction. And one thing that stuck in my mind was one of the therapists said that she went into a family and said, right, I'm just going to observe you play. And the parent said, I don't know how to play. And she said to me, right, that's where my work started. And it never dawned on me that actually there is probably many, many parents out there that either don't know how to play or don't feel comfortable with playing. Could be from their own experience as a child, something, or it could just be their personality, traits and characteristics that they have. What about those parents that maybe struggle in that space of playing with their child? Are there things that they can still do that will still be beneficial in that moment?
So yeah, find moments to connect with your child. Find moments to have someone one-on-one time with them, right? It could be that you go for a walk together and just observe the nature around you, or perhaps you go to the local coffee shop and have a hot chocolate together, right? So it really so have a time that's connected where the rest of the world kind of drops off and it's just you and that child. There's no teaching, there's no talking about school unless it's just casual conversation, there's no lecturing. It's just that pure time to connect and just learn more about each other, right? Because we learn a lot about our children when we have one-on-one time with them, free of, their siblings or the other parent. And I remember mine with my children. They were beautiful moments, those one-on-one times.
Yeah, and they kind of get missed, don't they, as the children get older? Like my daughter turns 20 this year, and it's trying to make those times of having the kind of bonding time together. I mean, it's less so playful time now, but more just kind of bonding and spending time together. And it's harder as they get older to find that time. But so my daughter is autistic, as am I, and she's ADHD. So actually, co-regulation is something that we deal with a lot in our household. And actually dysregulation, because we can both get dysregulated for different reasons. And when we're both dysregulated, that's a really hard space to be in, because you can't really co-regulate. And I guess we've got to an understanding now of our relationship. We know how to navigate through those moments. We both know how we both cope in those situations, which is in our own space, and then coming together. What we normally do is, and obviously she's older, but we will talk over text message whilst we're coming down from it, and then we can come together in the room. I mean, for technology does have a place sometimes. But that can be really hard when you have a neurodivergent parent with a neurodivergent child, and that regulation isn't always matched up. So I guess that can be really hard in terms of how do you co-regulate then? How do you navigate that if you have a particularly small child? Obviously, my daughter's older, so I can have a conversation with her.
Okay. So first thing that comes to mind is the texting, right? What you're doing is you are actually using your thumbs, or whichever, it's actually physical. There is a kind of a physical outlet there. right? So you are
Okay.
regulating, like basic, like really part of it through your body. So I think to answer your question, as a parent, again, whether we're neurotypical or neurodivergent, to start to really figure out what it is that you need when you're not dysregulated, right? In those moments of dysregulation, and taking that pause and going to that tool, to that strategy that you've learned for yourself, right?
Mm,
Again, the pause is the number one primary important thing. To let's pause and break that that chain of automatic reaction. So so using that strategy that you have. But what I also want to say is, in the face of a dysregulated child, the parent is not regulated. Their nervous system is not regulated because it's picking up the dysregulation of their child.
right.
But what's different between we hope will be different between the parent and the child is that even in that dysregulation, the parent can still have and we'll talk about the dysregulation as activation or energy. The parent can still connect to themselves. They can feel their breath. They can feel their feet on the ground. They can stay grounded, right? And in order to, again, support their child. So they are regulated in their dysregulation, right?
Right.
So they know that, like a parent will know that, oh, after I pause, I really need to take 3 deep breaths in order to stay regulated, or I need to rock gently back and forth. Or it's really helpful for me if I really rub my arms up and down my arms really, really hard to bring myself back into my body. So
Yeah.
it's figuring out what works for you in order to be able to support your child.
Mm. That's really reassuring, actually, to hear that, as a parent, you can be dysregulated, but still have an element of regulation to then support your child. And I guess some of that must be down to that lived experience of, you're an adult, so you've had more time to experience dysregulation and re-regulation, and grounding yourself and knowing what works in those moments for you, before you've become a parent. So having that skill set and those tools already in you, so when those moments do come up, and I guess I guess it does develop over time, because I know that when my daughter was younger and she was dysregulated, I struggled a lot more than if she was to dysregulate as she got older. Um, when she was younger, neither of us knew about any sort of neurodivergency. I didn't get diagnosed until 2 years ago. She didn't get diagnosed till she was 16. So we navigated the early parenting years, both not knowing why certain feelings were there, why we struggled with certain things. So I don't know if that plays a part, but definitely how we coped in those dysregulated moments as a young child and a younger parent, and where we are now, or even like through the teen years, things like that, that was very different. So I guess you kind of learn those tools over time. So it is really reassuring to hear that kind of you are able to regulate within dysregulation.
Yes. Well, so if I can just throw out another term, and this has been, I'm sure you may have heard this before, the window of tolerance, right? So, a window of tolerance is how much activation can I tolerate in my nervous system before I go into fight, flight, or collapse response, right?
Right.
And over time, we're able to widen that window of tolerance so that we can tolerate more and more activation without going into fight, flight, or collapse response, right? So, I mean, a child has a very narrow window of tolerance, and we're helping widen that window of tolerance. You as an adult, or me, us as adults, we have widened our window of tolerance as time has gone on.
Is that a natural thing that happens, or is it something you actively have to work on?
Both, um, right? Because there are some things that um, I think with exposure will naturally happen that others won't. There if you a certain trigger, let's say a childhood experience, or let's say that you were punished every time that you didn't finish your dinner on your plate, for instance, right? So dinner time for you may always be activating, and that's something that you probably will have to work on deliberately in order to
Right.
widen the window of tolerance, right?
Right, I get it. Okay. So obviously our own experiences are going to play into that depending on how tolerant we are in those windows and what things that are going to set them off a lot
Yes.
easier than kind of, I don't want to say your standardized triggers, but things that, many people experience that maybe is something a bit more naturally increasing over time, but specific things that are specific to you and your experience
Mhm.
are obviously going to trigger you in different ways. So yeah, that makes sense for it to be.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'll give an example. My daughter was terrified of flying bugs. They were ZZs, terrified of ZZs. Today, she's an adult. She's okay with bugs, right? So over time, she's widened that window of tolerance.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about your book. You've written a book. Is it out now for people to purchase?
It is out now. Actually, it's published in the UK. So yeah, and it is out now. It's a book that's been in the making for probably 15 years. Um,
Wow.
yes, because I used to do a lot of facilitating a lot of parent education groups, which I loved, and I always wanted to write a book. And as the years, and every year it would be, yeah, I'd like to write that book. Finally, neuroscience came in and the study of the brain and the nervous system, and that was the piece that was missing for my book, right? So I could sit down and put all of my thoughts down on paper and turn it into that book that I've, as I say, been wanting to write for 15 years.
Well, congratulations for
Thank
getting
you.
there and achieving it. Sometimes these ones that kind of grow over a long period of time, they're the kind of the ones that mean the most to us because we've worked so long and so hard on them. So who's the book for? What's it about? What can people expect if they buy it?
So it's for anybody who is in contact with children, anybody who like it could be so caregivers, uh, preschool preschool teachers, daycare providers, teachers, as I say, anybody who comes into contact with children. And what I hope to achieve in my book is to simplify the brain and the nervous system for people to, again, make it palatable so that, yeah, to keep it, to keep it as little, to keep as little to keep the integrity without getting really scientific into it, and then
Yeah.
providing um, some strategies to helping your child with regulation. Some real life examples are in there. There, I provide little exercises to think about at the end of each chapter to try and integrate that, the learning. I hope that parents understand how hard parenting is and that this is not easy, right? Parenting's not easy, and neither is changing the way that you do things easy. And to know that there are moments when you're going to mess up, and that's okay because you're human. And I like to throw in, and I'll throw in this little statistic that we can only be attuned to our child 30% of the time. So, right, we can't be perfect parents. We can only be good enough parents. And what's important is what happens in that other 70% of the time when we are not attuned, when we mess up, is that we repair the relationship, is that we apologize, right? I'm so sorry that I yelled at you. I wish I had taken a breath and asked if you needed help, right? That rupture and repair is actually what builds closeness and attachment more so than doing it well the 30% of the time.
Mm.
And though we need to also the next time our child struggles with whatever, that we are true to our words, right? And live up, do what we said, what we apologized for, right? Or repair, change what we apologized for.
Mhm.
But again, we can't be perfect. We have to let go of that idea that we can be, and to know that the mistakes are actually valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to take those opportunities to learn from them, don't we? Like we said, there is no handbook on parenting, and even if there were, it wouldn't fit every child. So we do have to work with work with what we have in the room and the skill set that we have, the knowledge that we have, and the rest of it we learn as we go. We reflect, and I like what you say about kind of almost the accountability element of it, and actually I guess matching up your actions with your words, because you can say things until you're blue in the face, but if your actions don't match them, children, especially young children, are going to pick up on that because they very much will read you by your actions, won't they, rather than necessarily understanding the words that you're saying to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the important element is after the apology, there's no but, right? I yelled at you because, but like I had to ask you 14 times. No, there's no but. That negates the apology. And also, we are modeling to our children. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. And we apologize and do better, right? So to model that our children don't need to be perfect, that they're allowed to make mistakes and they can learn from them, right? And the most powerful teacher for a child is the modeling.
So from your book, what would you say that modern parents need to know and understand about children today?
What they need to know more than anything is one, children are not bad. Your child is not bad. They're not misbehaving. They are communicating a need. And um, and so knowing that your child is not manipulative. Your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old is not manipulative. They're incapable of being manipulative because their connection to their prefrontal cortex is not, it's actually not even connected at that point, right? So children are not manipulative. um, they don't have the brain capacity to do that. um, and as this and that and slow down, slow
Mhm.
down. And life and parenting is not a competition, right? um, Take the time to trust, for parents to trust their inner knowing. Listen to what they know best, because there's a lot of information out there that um, can be really conflicting. So listen to what really resonates with you, right? And take that. And as I say, slow down and enjoy the journey. It goes really fast. It's really bumpy. Not all moments are joyous moments, right? You know that. I know that through lived experience. Um, yeah, and play with your child, right? And if you don't know how to play, then find ways of connecting.
Mm.
Right? And yeah, and unfortunately, some people haven't had the opportunity to play. Growing up, life was too serious. It wasn't safe. There we go. It's safety. It wasn't safe to play. We always had to stay on guard because of, whatever might be happening in the household.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there are, I mean, as much as there's a lot of conflicting information and advice online, there is also a lot of information out there that you could maybe take and put it into the context of within your own home, within your own family space, and adapt it as needed. But sometimes we just need a bit of guidance or a bit of clarity around something, and there are spaces online to do that. I mean, do you have a website? Is there a website that we can direct people to for more information on the work that you do?
Um, there is a website. It's called Neuroinformed. It's neuroinformed.ca. At this time, there's not a whole lot of information on there, but certainly it is there. There is a website. Um, and yeah, as this, like I say, read my book. Then you don't have to have any other information. But that's, but even that, as I say that, tongue in cheek, even that, again, it's taking what works and what fits for you. Because what fits for you and what's real for you is going to be real for your child. It's when you do something that's not quite a fit for you, like you're not comfortable with it. And your child can sense that. And if you're not comfortable with something, they won't be comfortable with something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, as I said, find what works and what fits for you.
Mm-hmm.
Be discerning.
Yeah, yeah. You also, as well as kind of looking at the parent and the child, you also mentor therapists and work with professionals in the work that you do. Are you seeing a shift in how professionals understand and work with children as well?
Um, Most definitely seeing a shift, but in the understanding and the work with children. But what brought that shift? What caused that shift, or the factor for that, is that when we were trained as therapists, we were trained to be blank slates. You go into the therapy room, you have empathy, but you can't feel, right? With this neuroscience and the mirror neurons and how our nervous systems always communicate with each other, therapists have been given permission to show up as they truly are and to feel their client. Right now, not emote and, of course, still remain professional and not pour all of your stuff onto your client, but to be able to experience a sad story with a client and say, wow, that really touched my heart, and there
Mm.
are tears in my eyes, like to really be real and authentic. And that's been the biggest change, is it has allowed us as therapists to be our authentic selves and really truly um, connect with our clients on that deep emotional level.
Mm. I imagine that's got to be really hard to not bring, like when you're saying like now people are able to bring their more authentic self, but prior to that, that must be really hard to not bring that element into it. I don't know if it's just me. I'm a very emotive person. I feel everything. I don't think I'd make a very good therapist because I feel everything. But I imagine that must be really hard to not bring that to the table. Surely it's a good thing to be able to bring that emotion in, obviously within the boundaries of the role.
Hmm. It's freeing. It's freeing. And, so according to synergetic play therapy, one of the threats to our brain, which will flip it into dysregulation, is incongruence in the environment, right? So what you see and what you hear or feel are two different things, and that is unsafe to our brain. It goes like, I don't know what I'm supposed to, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, right? If I had a frown on my face or a smile on my face, I told you I was angry.
Yeah.
What? So I come in, I'm not authentic. That little nervous system in the room with me feels that inauthenticity and feels the incongruence in me, which does not create a really safe environment for them.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
So,
absolutely.
mhm.
Yeah.
and I've experienced both sides, right? And the difference of staying, it really is staying almost superficial in your expressions, in your reflections to your client versus really, as I said, a deep connection. And what I have found also is that when you connect nervous system to nervous system, the work moves a lot quicker.
Yeah. I guess as well, it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about that co-regulation between a parent and a child. If somebody is coming into the space and speaking with you, whether that's therapist to therapist during a mentoring session or something like that. It's that element of, like I say, mirroring and feeling in those moments. So I guess it goes across the board.
Absolutely. And it's even transmitted on the screens.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? It really is quite amazing. So I do 95% of my work is teletherapy, right? And yeah, screens are not an inhibitor.
Well, this is reassuring to hear after COVID, where everything kind of went a lot more onto screens. So you can still get the benefits of that feeding off of the nervous systems and the support and the regulation through a screen. Is it the same? Do you think that is it on par? Obviously, I know that you do a lot of your work on the screen, but would you say that there is more benefit to be in person, or not a difference, or is there not enough research out there to answer that?
I mean, I can answer it personally, but there isn't enough research out there for sure to answer that, with certainty. There's something about person-to-person connection that can't be replaced, I think, which I miss at times. But I do not feel that I am at a loss or at a disadvantage because I'm working on screen. Right.
Mm-hmm. I guess as well, an element of it is dependent on the other person on the other side of the screen,
Yes.
as to how they receive things as well.
Yes. And dependent on the therapist, right? There are therapists who can't do it, and fair enough, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
No,
I just find it very I just find it works beautifully for me.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
and that's key, isn't it? Because when something is, and it goes back to what you're saying about what feels right and that intuition, and you know in your gut when something is right for you, when you need to adapt, flex, change, whatever. So if that feels right for you, then it's the perfect solution for you and the people that you work with, which is beautiful. We've covered quite a lot of information, and quite a lot of complex information, really, in such a short space of time. But what message would you like listeners to walk away from our conversation today with? If you could just pick kind of one main message to come away with and to kind of ponder over, what would that message be?
Your child's behavior is not personal, and know that it is again an expression of the nervous system and an unmet need.
Yeah,
And it's
I
not
love that.
easy. Yeah, and it's not easy to figure out what that need is. It takes time and practice.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that, again, that reassurance to any parents listening that it's not personal, I think that's really important, because sometimes in those moments it feels very personal. um, so I
Yeah,
think that's a really important message.
like hearing, "I hate you. You're the worst parent ever." Right?
Yeah,
You're really mad at me right now because I won't let you, whatever,
yeah,
right? Because they use the strongest words that they know to express as strongly the message as strongly as they can, right? They want that message to come across, but it's not about you.
yeah. No, absolutely. Joanna, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us today. It's been really lovely to hear your insights on what is a very complex but a very real thing that parents are going through every single day. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to talk this through. Chuffed that you've got a book out that people can then follow on this conversation with, and have a read about that. Where can they find the book? I can pop a link underneath the episode. Where is it available for people to find?
Amazon, and I guess directly from the publisher, which is Olympia Press.
Okay.
But Amazon's the easiest, probably.
Brilliant. What I'll do is I'll pop some links underneath the episode for that, and back to your website as well. So if people want to see more or get in contact with you, then they can do through that way. But thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.